Hey guys, I wanted to go ahead and show you the results of some radar testing. This is not going to be any sort of big formal test. It's basically grab a couple radar detectors that I've got sitting around, go up to a speed sign in my backyard, and then just do a bunch of runs against it and see what happens. So we're not actually going to be testing against a police radar gun. It's going to be testing against a speed sign. What we're going to be testing, I'll go ahead and put a picture of the course up on the screen, and the way it works is we've got some foresty terrain. And we're going to be driving towards a K-band speed sign. As you can see, there's two main curves that we approach. There's curve 1, where we kind of bend to the left, and then curve 2, where we bend against to the right. The detectors will all alert somewhere between curve 1 and curve 2 as you start approaching the speed sign. The best detectors will be, curve 1, maybe a little bit before, a little bit after. The kill zone will be just after curve 2, like right as you face the speed sign, and you'll see that once we start doing some runs. One thing I always like to point out about any test is no one test is going to be representative of the big picture. It's more like you take a look at a whole bunch of little tests and you can kind of piece together the big picture from a variety of tests. This course we're going to be doing the run from, it's in the middle of the day when there's actually traffic, and traffic will interfere with the test results, which is why I say don't necessarily take these results too seriously. This is going to be more real-world testing, and we've got more variables. There's going to be vehicles potentially blocking the signal here and there, which may give us shorter results. But then we may also have vehicles, way off, which could actually reflect the signal back towards us, which could give us longer than accurate results. So the traffic could interfere with the signal. We're going to be running the tests with the detectors actually 2 different times. We're going to be running it the first time in full sensitivity mode, to get maximum performance out of the detector. And then for the second pass with the same detector, we're going to be changing the settings to give it a more filtered approach against K-band to see if we actually want to start filtering out blind spot monitoring systems, for example, with the built-in options. How much does performance drop? And you're actually going to get to see that there. There's going to be a number of things that you'll notice. You'll see oftentimes range will decrease. It'll take longer for the detector to alert. There will be delayed alerts. You'll see the ramp up quality change. It might be less aggressive to ramp up just to keep things quieter and more calm for the driver. So you'll see that. So you'll get to see not only which detector is better, which one can detect farther away. Turns out it's not really so much that. You'll get to see a variety of different properties about the detectors, both in unfiltered raw maximum performance settings, as well as also in filtered, K-band filtered settings. And I'll narrate a little bit to kind of point out some of the things that you can look for and also explain what it is that we're looking at. So the detectors that we're going to be running here, we've got 5 different radar detectors. We've got the Cobra SPX 7800 BT. The next one, and it actually tied for this one, is the Whistler CR85. In this test, you'll see in full performance, they get pretty much identical performance there. The next one is going to be the Escort Passport Max 2. Then the 4th detector tested is going to be the Valentine 1. And then finally at the very end, we've got a special mystery guess, which you probably aren't going to guess. But fun one we're going to be saving toward the end. So we're going to do 2 extra runs with the V1, mounted up high rather than in the front, which you'll see. And then we'll do our mystery guess at the end. So with that said, let's go ahead and start taking a look at the Cobra test runs. The Cobra that we'll be testing will be their top-end SPX 7800 BT. We'll go ahead and do it in performance settings first, so you'll get to see its detection range, and then we'll go ahead and enable some filters to help deal with the false alerts, and you'll see how the range drops and also the quality of the ramp up changes as well. So here's the Cobra in highway mode. So as you can see, the way the Cobra is designed, it likes to keep things really quiet at first, and then once the signal gets strong enough, and in this case it's about 1 second before the speed is registered, that's actually when it begins alerting fully and gets your attention. Next up, we're going to go ahead and test the Whistler, which is going to go ahead and give us pretty much the same range as we saw with the Cobra. Its filtering settings are going to be even more aggressive, and so you'll get to see the changes that the Whistlers will do. Whistler CR85, highway mode, TFSR turned off, so full sensitivity. Whistler CR85, city mode, TFSR on, and XK filter 1. So as you can see with the Whistler CR85, the range unfiltered is pretty much identical with the Cobra. The ramp up is a little bit better, but not really. And then once you filter it, you get a pretty drastic reduction in range. You get the first 2 sets of beeps, and then the second set of beeps come basically to alert you at the same time that the radar gun is actually clocking your speed. So hopefully you've noticed the first sets of beeps, you've seen something going on with the detector, and you're already slowing down by then. Next, we'll go ahead and test the Escort Passport Max 2. You'll see this one has very nice range as well and a very nice linear progressive ramp up, meaning you can both hear and see the signal strength building over time, which is very helpful, very useful. Once we turn on the filters, you'll see the range reduction again. The detector is going to wait until the signal is strong enough before it begins alerting. However, it is going to go ahead and start really getting our attention before we're in the kill zone, which is going to be really important. Max 2, full sensitivity, highway mode, X off, KNKA on, TSR off, GPS filtering off. Auto mode and TSR turned on. And as you can see, the Max 2 did a great job. It gave us plenty of range and a wonderful, nice ramp up. Once we enabled the filters, it still did a good job. There was a drop in range, but we still got plenty of alert, before the kill zone. So, it definitely was getting our attention before it was time to say, hey, slow down. Next, we're going to go ahead and test the Valentine 1, and you'll see that this one's going to give us the longest range out of any of the detectors tested, and it's also going to give us the smallest penalty once we enable the filters. You'll see once we start running the V1 that it actually lights up, and then it'll start making the sounds. I do have some additional muting stuff set up in the V1 that isn't available in the other detectors, so it is going to visually light up before it makes any sounds, and that could be disabled, but I actually just didn't do that for these videos. V1 3.8945, TMF2 off, K-pop on, custom sweat 258. V1 3.8945, TMF2 on, K-pop off, seg 258. And so as you can see, the V1 definitely does a great job here. It's got plenty of range, and even once we enable TMF2, which they now call their junk K-Fighter, it still does a great job at alerting, gives you beautiful ramp up, plenty of range, all that good stuff. One thing interesting to note is that this filter actually works better than the one on the Max 2 in terms of filtering out blind spot falses, and yet there's less of a penalty to it, so kind of interesting however they've done that. Anyways, next I want to go ahead and take the V1 and I'm going to mount it way up high by the rear view mirror, which is where I normally run it. Sometimes you'll hear people say that radar detection happens better if you've got the detector mounted higher, and I figured, well, why not? I'll go ahead and mount mine up high. I'm just experimenting anyways, and let's see what happens. V1 3.8945, K and KA on, seg 258, TMF2 off, K-pop on, so full sensitivity. V1 3.8945 high mount filtered. TMF2 on, K-pop off. Seg 258. So, results. Is there a difference? For the original unfiltered test, they were virtually identical. Once we enabled TMF2, there was about a 1.5 second difference. Is it the result of a higher mount? I don't know. I didn't do a whole bunch of tests to verify, make sure traffic was an issue, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure that if I went to maybe a longer, straighter, different course, I might have different results that would, show more of a difference. So I don't know, but hey, just all for the sake of experimenting. It looks like, there you go. It looks like it definitely can help. Can't say for sure, obviously, again, that it's because of that, but whatever. Anyways. Now, last but not least, we're going to be testing a fun detector that I've never tested before. This is the Cobra Trapshooter. This was a detector, I'm not actually sure when it came out, I was looking it up. I know it was being sold in the mid-80s. But yeah, this is an old detector. It's X-band and K-band only, decades of years old. And so a friend of mine sent me one of these in excellent condition, so I figured, hey, might as well run in some detectors. Let's put it up and just see how it does. So this one does have a city and a highway mode, so we're going to go ahead and do the same runs in both modes, and I don't know, let's see how it does. Cobra Trapshooter in highway mode. Cobra Trapshooter in city mode. So how about that old Cobra? She's still working, still kicking. Good to see. Yeah, so that's a detector back from the mid '80s and still working. Obviously not as well as some of the more recent detectors, but hey, this is detectors created 30 years later. What was that? 85, 95, 05, 15. So yeah, 30-year difference in detectors. There's really little to no filtering on that old Cobra. It basically just turns the sensitivity down. So yeah, as far as these filters, you can tell they definitely have a huge impact in performance. The way these filters work, they're doing a couple things. They're going to be maybe reducing sensitivity altogether just to filter out a lot of the weak signals and give you fewer alerts. They're also going to be potentially delaying alerts. Some of the false alerts are going to be very brief in duration, and so one of the techniques used to filter out these alerts is to wait a certain amount of time, half a second, 1 second, second and a half, certain amount of time, so that if a signal lasts longer than that, then it's going to alert. So that can also show you some of the decreased range that you're seeing here in the test. This, like I said earlier, it was one of those tests where I didn't really have like a certain point to do it. I didn't really have like a point I was trying to prove. I just kind of figured, hey, I got a speed sign down the road. I got a bunch of detectors here. Let's just throw them in the car and go and see what happens, And I guess looking over the results here, one of the main things I noticed was kind of the personality of the detectors. Yeah, I know a lot of tests will show the distance. This one can detect farther away than that, and that's cool. But one thing I really liked from this one was actually seeing, particularly once the filtering is enabled, how do the detectors perform? How heavily do they actually filter out this signal? How aggressively do they begin alerting before you're actually in the kill zone? Like, that's really important stuff, and I don't think that's necessarily talked about too much, so it's really cool to see it illustrated so clearly like this in this test. The newer Cobra and the Whistler, as you saw in the beginning of the test, they kind of waited till the very last second to really get on and start alerting due to the way the filtering was set up. The Max 2 and the V1, what I really liked about them is the fact that they would actually begin alerting, very intently before you were in the kill zone, and that's really important. I am newer to the Whistler and the newer Cobra. I've only been running these detectors, in the car for like maybe 2 days each one, and so I'm really still getting a feel for them. So I'm curious, those of you guys who have been running these detectors for a while, if you can let me know how effective their filtering techniques are at filtering out blind spot monitoring systems, that would be really helpful. I'd love to know that. In my experience with the V1 and the Max 2, the V1 now with the new TMF2 upgrade that they're calling the Junk K Fighter actually does do a better job than the Max. I think I mentioned it earlier in the video, and yet there's less of a performance penalty. There's less delay, and you still get better range. I mean, it's pretty cool how they did that. I don't necessarily know how well and how effective the Whistler and the Cobra techniques are at filtering out the false alerts. I can post more about that once I get, more seat time with them, and I'll post reviews of those detectors specifically. One thing talking about filtering out false alerts, should we consider this speed sign a false alert? Because on one hand, we could say, no, it's not a police officer, it's not a threat, so I want to filter it out, right? On the other hand, the radar that's being transmitted from this speed sign is going to effectively be identical to what's coming out of a police radar gun, so there's really no reason to treat it as anything other than police radar. That's the thing about a lot of these radar sources, is they look virtually identical to police radar. There's not really an easy way to look at the signal itself and do some underlying analysis and say, oh, this is clearly a blind spot filter. With some cars you can. It works sometimes. You need more sophisticated filtering. It's one of the things that Stinger is doing. But yeah, I mean, if we take a look at these results here, we could say, well, our Cobra and Whistler, is there reduced range because they're actually doing a better job at filtering out this quote-unquote false alert? Or is it because maybe they're not as sensitive and they're more aggressive with their false alerts? Or, like, what is it? My best guess looking at this is because the radar should be virtually identical to police radar, it seems to me that the filtering algorithms are better in the Escort product and the V1 in this particular case. And so if we were to take this speed sign as if it was a police radar unit, you can see that the V1 and the Max 2 are definitely going to do a better job at alerting you to the threat in time and really getting your attention. And that's really important, especially with how prevalent false alerts are from, again, these blind spot cars. It's really, really common to get like a single beep of just a weak signal from a car that's passing you. And a single beep that doesn't really ramp up over time oftentimes is the signature of a blind spot vehicle, which is why seeing a ramp up is so, so critical. That's one of the best ways that I've found to actually differentiate in practice in the field between a legitimate signal and a false alert, is watching that ramp up. So either listening or watching is really, really important. And that's why I love seeing the linear ramp up that we've got in the V1 and the Max 2. The Whistler does do a better job. It goes from 1 to 9, so you've got more increments there. The Cobra goes from 1 to 5, so there's not a lot of chunks. Plus, it likes to jump, as you saw, from like 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 to 5. It's not like a really progressive ramp up, and that's something that you will see on the higher end products. Yeah, so that was cool. Hope that's been helpful. Like I said, for those of you guys who've used these products, the Cobras and the Whistlers specifically, the ones that I'm newer to, I would really love to hear your feedback on what you found in terms of how effective these are specifically at filtering out the blind spot cars. And finally, the last thing I'd want to say is the terrain is definitely going to make a big difference. You saw that we've got a lot of trees here and some curves, so that kind of stuff really absorbs radar. And so with the filters off, for example, they all alert roughly around the same time, plus minus a couple seconds, like that first bend to the left, right? And it doesn't look like there's a huge, huge difference. And so you may wonder, like, oh, is an expensive radar detector really worth it? Well, first of all, you can see, like, once the filters are enabled, which oftentimes are a necessity just due to how many false alerts there are, the terrain is going to make a huge difference, and I put out a video recently discussing this and showing you a whole bunch of examples so you can really see it for yourself. The video is over half an hour long. It's pretty comprehensive, and it's basically answering, with respect to radar sensitivity, whether or not a more expensive radar detector is worth it, because there are situations like this where a lot of the radar detectors, the cheaper ones and the more expensive ones, will give you pretty similar range. So I'll put a clip of that up on the screen. You can click on it. And if you're on your phone or iPad or something, I'll put it in the video description. But yeah, cool. So hey, thanks for coming along. This was just kind of a let's go out and goof around and see what happens and just learn something, And yeah, really enjoyed getting a feel for the personality of the different detectors and how they handle alerting to radar when they've got their filters enabled. So that was cool. Yeah, that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.